On this question of recruiting, training, and then developing, why have we not been very good at this?
I think we have been good in part. What we haven't been good enough at is spotting the emerging trends. So the huge increase in the need for electrification skills, for example. And then having spotted those trends, being able to create the money go around so that companies and organisations can take risk on recruiting more people to do that. Because, of course, until contracts are actually firmly awarded, until that point, you are at commercial risk. And for some organisations, that's a really big decision to make. How we warm the supply chain up to some of the large investments that we're developing, I think, is an area where we have not been very wise at all.
I think I'm right in saying that Jaguar Land Rover at Birmingham Aston has worked very, very closely over a number of years to determine what skills they're going to need if they're going to keep that car plant there and functioning. And I wonder if the same thing is something that the Railway Supply Group is doing with universities and technical colleges.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're very lucky that NSAR have been, which is the skills development organisation for the rail industry, has been working over the last 4 or 5 years to identify how many new engineers are we going to need, what's the level of turnover, what type of skills they're going to need. And they've done a fantastic job. What we haven't done as an industry really is grab hold of their message and implement it. And part of that is because take my own business, for example, we've got 2 years. You know, the business may not be here in 2 years' time. So I can't take a risk over 3, 4 or 5 years under where the current economics work. The incentives can be it's terribly short term. Now, but frankly, it's still going to be £1 billion a year passenger railway in 2 years' time. Someone will be running it. I hope it will be me.
But it's not the best way for you to say it will be you, is to say that you are taking a long-term view.
Well, absolutely. But of course, and that's actually been our approach over the last 3 years. But how much money can you put on that? Because when you're talking about recruiting people and investing in people, you very quickly rack up bills of a number of millions of pounds. And absolutely, if the franchise competitions or the tender competitions for supply of projects, for example, take into account investments that have been made in advance, great. I think that would encourage people to make those proactive investments. What we've got to do is join up our procurement processes to recognise that there's a credit for investing in advance. It's within our gift to do that, I think, certainly with support from the Department for Transport. There's no reason why we can't mature our procurement processes to recognise those who have taken significant risk and invested in the future.
On the customer experience, I mean, from my point of view, from being a long-distance traveller, I mean, it's pie in the sky because economically it might not work, but the kind of thing I would love would be if there was a carriage dedicated to something like a gym or a nail bar or a hairdresser or something that was different, that was an added value. And the second thing is, if you're talking about the under-25s not buying cars, what they are doing is cycling. And yet on trains, the cycle capacity is dreadful.
Yeah, and I think the key part of what you're explaining is capacity. The railway, and certainly London South East is probably the most extreme example of it, is driven by that must traveller.
Yeah.
Getting the number of seats into the terminal stations in London in the morning and in the evening and really trying to do it. And there's very little availability for us to innovate around that. Now, we're looking at things, I mean, and everything you've mentioned, believe it or not, we've built business cases for on recent bids. But you're right, they haven't quite made it because you are heavily incentivised as a train operator to provide capacity. You know, that's rule number one. But I think over time, as more capacity comes into the network, you're less constrained, particularly in the off-peak, you'll be able to do things. So we're looking at innovative solutions around tables. Yeah. Very, very useful in the peak if you're working. In the off-peak, you can fold it away, store some more bikes. Not quite a nail bar, but you can store some more bikes and do some more stuff with it. So it is changing, but there is some really big, hairy problems with the railway industry about getting people into the place of work ultimately. So it's that balance between leisure and commute.
But again, on that point, I'm speaking selfishly here about the Edinburgh-Glasgow line, where you're actually doing the Winchburn Tunnel now, so we can actually have faster, better service to Edinburgh. But you're talking about the end point. I mean, and you're going to have to wait another 2 years for Queen Street Station to look anything more like a dump. You do, and we apologise for that. But again, it's that balance between running an operational railway. Quite frankly, you could close the railway for 3 months and do it. You know, work 24-hour shifts, and I can understand it. 3 months disruption would be far more painful. Winchburn Tunnel is quite unique in the sense that we have closed the railway. You know, the business case and the feeling to do that made sense, but it's not a pleasant experience for the passenger. So it is absolutely that balance between
giving good customer service and upgrading the railway. And, you know, I think if you shut the railway for a year, a lot of these problems could get solved overnight. But of course, you can't shut the railway for a year.
Peter Rayner's not here because he'd have ripped your head off over your presentation. Because, of course, people over 65 don't use technology. No, they don't. This is all the research we've done.
Okay.
And part of Tomorrow's Rail, we've seen this. Old people do not use technology.
People over 65 aren't old. I think you're talking... they're not. And I think actually you might say 75 plus are less likely to use technology. So is there a helping hand?
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. It is a fair point. I mean, there is this swell of technology, and you know, different people adapt to it in different ways. I think one of the benefits of the railway industry is that we are, unlike in part of our continental neighbours, we are very much taking people with us. So I think a lot of what I talked about there is addition to what's there now, rather than removing what's there now. There's been big outcry in Holland because they're actually now systematically removing paper tickets. And exactly what Pete mentioned, a certain demographic prefer a paper ticket for whatever reason.
It's security.
It's security, and you know you've got it in your hand and you're not going to lose it. So I think there's definitely a massive education job there about how the benefits of things like that, and then the training job. You know, a big trend in what we do is about taking people out from ticket offices, from outside the glass, and actually interacting with passengers directly. And that really is about education as well as retail.
Hello, Patrick Gannon. I'm a graduate engineer for Transport for London. I was just wondering, is the fragmented nature of the national rail industry, does that present a massive barrier for technological advancements with innovation? Just in terms of, if everyone comes up with different innovations, yes, it encourages competition, etc. But can that not be confusing for passengers wanting to make multimodal journeys?
Let Tim do this one, because
I just look at the Oyster card in London, for example. You can go anywhere, use a tram, use a bus, use London Underground, multimodal transport models done by different companies. Whereas if Belly have a smart card, you can't use it on the buses at that end as such. Is this a challenge?
At the end of the day, the passenger experience, customer experience needs to be consistent, irrespective of who the operator is. So,
just put chip in here.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's all going to come, isn't it? It's beyond me, but it will. I think so. The principle has to be consistent, has to be compatible going across boundaries. What we're seeing is the growing pains of, you know, the prestige system that Oyster sits on wouldn't work on national rail. The ITSO system, which the DfT is sponsoring, is now being retrofitted, and I think from within a few months will work on all London buses and all London Underground. So this is the growing pains and the emerging of the technology, but ultimately it has to be common.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank our guests.